Hello, class of 2019. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you, Dean Wiltsis, for that kind introduction and for your leadership as Executive Dean of the College of Letters and Science. And thank you, Chancellor Yang, for your inspirational dedication and service to this university. I want to thank the distinguished College of Letters and Science faculty and staff for your commitment and service to UC Santa Barbara and the student body. Thanks to your hard work and leadership, this beautiful university has become one of the world's great public institutions of higher learning. To the parents, families, and friends of the UCSB College of Letters and Science of 2019, I congratulate you on this great day, and I join you in saluting these graduates who we are here to celebrate today. And most importantly, I want to honor and celebrate the graduates we're here to recognize, the UCSB College of Letters and Science class of 2019. You all have each worked so hard to reach this milestone in your life, and the next chapter of your lives is waiting to be written. As you leave the journey of an academic life, charted by course catalogs and degree requirements, you'll now set a course that you will navigate for yourselves. You will each pursue your North Star. The future is yours to create. It's an exciting time. The world is waiting for you. Today, I want to share my story with you. And I want to tell you what I've learned about the importance of applying knowledge and curiosity and passion in service of science-based solutions and being an actively engaged citizen and problem solver. I am so fortunate that I studied at UCSB's pioneering environmental studies program, which I cannot believe is going to celebrate its 50th anniversary next year. Happy birthday, yes. The interdisciplinary environmental studies program provided me with the perfect education for my chosen profession. In my career in environmental policy, politics, advocacy, and philanthropy, I think I have used every scrap of knowledge I gleaned during my undergraduate years. UCSB's Environmental Studies Department, my alumni network, and the lifelong friends I met in the legendary Introduction to Environmental Studies class remain some of the most important touchstones in my life. In fact, one of those friends from my undergrad days is here in the audience today watching his son, Connor Gutman, graduate with a degree in chemistry. Congratulations, Connor, you're out there. My path to UCSB and environmental studies was clear. You see, I decided that I wanted to have a career in environmental politics, whatever that was, at the sagacious age of 12 years old. And I have never looked back on that decision. Now, you might wonder, how did I decide so young that environmental politics was my life's work? Well, I grew up in Los Angeles in the pre-Clean Air Act era. My family had a cabin in the San Bernardino National Forest situated at 7,000 feet altitude. On weekdays, I lived in Pasadena, which in those days suffered from frequent smog alerts and severe air pollution. And on weekends, our family would go up to the mountains, and I'd explore the woods and immerse myself in nature, often hiking alone with my collie dog, Prince, as a companion. And I was a lucky city kid. I learned how to be comfortable in nature. Then on Sundays, we'd drive back to LA, descending down the mountain through the smog inversion layer back into the city's pollution and traffic. And as a child, I experienced the duality of environmental beauty in the forest and the beast of urban pollution in the city. And that experience shaped my ambitions, my values, and my ideals. My parents belonged to many environmental organizations, and their newsletters were my first environmental education. They described important environmental issues, and they often urged readers to write Congress or government agencies to ask us to take action for solutions. One organization's president, a woman named Celia Hunter, whose picture appeared on the newsletter's masthead, was important to me because that visual encouraged me to envision myself as a leader someday. Another influence was my cousin Haynes, who was his high school student body president, where he started his school's recycling center and other campus environmental programs. He kindled my belief, my unwavering belief, that one person can make a difference in this world. I loved nature, and I wanted to dedicate my life to protecting the environment. The message I got from those newsletters and from my family was that if you wanted to protect the environment, you needed to become engaged actively. And I saw that policy and politics was one way to help. So I set my course. And eventually, I found my way to UCSB's Environmental Studies program. And after I graduated, I was ready for my glorious career in environmental politics. I was ready to leap into my future, fully expecting there would be a net to catch me. But the world didn't seem to notice me. There wasn't a job in environmental politics waiting for me because, for most part, in those days, people didn't know what environmental politics meant. They didn't know they needed it, and therefore they didn't hire people to do it. So for 3 years, I worked at various jobs to make ends meet and tried to find a portal to my destiny. And finally, I got my break. The fellow I'd done my college internship with in Washington, D.C., called me one day out of the blue. We hadn't talked in 3 years. And he startled me by asking if I'd like to go to Iowa to work on a presidential campaign for a month. Fortunately, that candidate was who I'd already decided was the best environmental candidate, and so I was intrigued. I asked him how soon he needed me in Iowa. He said, in 2 days. I replied, I couldn't do that. I had a job. I was taking a couple of classes at UCLA and thinking about law school, and I had a serious boyfriend. So I did the practical thing. Within a week, I left my job, I dropped my classes, and I left my man. That's pretty enthusiastic for which part of that statement? I thought temporarily. And I flew to Iowa for what I thought was going to be a month. And guess what? I didn't return to live in California again for 27 years. I had found my life. For 3 decades, I've worked on presidential, Senate, and House campaigns in support of strong environmental candidates. I worked in the United States Senate on environment, energy, science, and tech issues. I lobbied just about every environmental issue you can think of. I worked for leading environmental grant-making foundations, working on local, national, and international environmental issues. I've worked and organized in 26 different states around the country and met thousands of fascinating people working to make the world a better place. I started my own consulting business. I ran important nonprofit organizations like the Heinz Center for Science, Economics, and the Environment. And for 10 years, I served as the president of the National League of Conservation Voters, the job I dreamed of when I was 12 years old. It's been a great ride. And my path ran right through the UCSB campus. Policy and politics aren't the only way to help the world, but they are my chosen skills. They are my tools in my career toolbox. And I built and I filled that toolbox during my time here at UCSB. Now that's my story. So now I want to talk about some ideas for you as you begin writing the next chapter in your stories and strive to achieve your dreams and make your marks on the world. My message isn't that each of you ought to become a lobbyist or that all of you should jump into politics, but I do challenge each of you to think about how are you going to play a role in solving some of the great and historic challenges facing our nation and our world today. During your studies at UCSB, you've acquired your own skill sets. You've filled your toolbox with the tools of your trade. Perhaps you majored in mathematics, chemistry, environmental studies, physics, or geography, or one of the other majors I didn't mention. Each of those fields of study provided you with the knowledge you need to enter your career of choice. And the question I have for each of you is, what role are you going to play in advancing the solutions we need in today's changing and challenging world? The hand of history is on our shoulders, says Grenada's Prime Minister Keith Mitchell, when he's talking about whether humanity will rise to the challenge of addressing the impacts of climate change on small island nations. We live in a time when global climate change is no longer a hypothesis. The science is clear. Our planet and its inhabitants are suffering the impacts of a warming planet now in real time. Concurrently, our transportation and energy sectors are being revolutionized with the emergence and adoption of clean and renewable new energy technologies. The battle to stem the worst impacts from climate change and the race to adopt and bring to scale clean energy technologies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions are two great challenges worthy of dedicating a career and a life to. Perhaps you plan to pursue research in nanotechnology or biochemistry to help the medical profession discover how to cure cancers or treat neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's disease. Or maybe you majored in environmental studies and you want to pursue a career in sustainable business practices or urban and transportation policy or environmental and politics and policy like I did. You've worked hard and earned the right to reach for your dreams. And I think you've got a responsibility now to find a way to use your talents for the greater good because the world needs your help as a problem solver. We are at an inflection point in history now, and what we do and how we do it makes a difference. Bobby Kennedy ran for president in 1968. He was President John F. Kennedy's younger brother. He was an inspirational figure who stood for taking action in support of great ideas and principles. And he observed, quote, "Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. Crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance." And I share the belief that one person can make a difference. And if we all embrace our responsibility as change makers, we can build the world and the future that we want to see. Now, I'm not saying every one of you ought to have a public interest job, but I am saying each of you should consider building a life that incorporates serving the public interest in some way, whether as a volunteer, a professional, or as an active and engaged citizen. And there are 3 ideas I'd like to have you think about. First, be a scientist citizen. Second, be a communicator and an ambassador for science. And third, be a problem solver. You've probably heard the term citizen science, where lay people participate in scientific endeavors by collecting data or engaging in activities to advance scientific knowledge. Citizen science also has the side benefit of helping non-scientists to understand the importance of using science to guide decision-making and facilitate clearer understanding of complex problems and solutions. So I'd like to flip the citizen science script and make the case for you to be scientists as engaged citizens. Has there ever been a time in history when it was more important for society to make decisions informed by science, good analysis, and critical thinking? I don't think so. Yet, increasingly, scientific facts and analysis are blithely dismissed by decision makers with doubt, disbelief, or indifference. And I believe the answer to indifference is not more detailed information, it is clearer communication, delivered in a way that connects with the intended audience using language they can relate to. When I worked in the United States Senate, I worked on environment, science, and tech issues, and I saw firsthand how frustrating it could be when we were trying to write a law to address a problem or fund a program, and our technical advisors and experts far too often were not able to translate their data or findings to recommendations. And we needed our science advisors to help us figure out how to solve a problem or achieve an important goal. We needed science to help guide our policies, yet too often it was inaccessible because of a lack of clear communication. My friend Bill Riley, who was the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency in George H.W. Bush's administration, tells a story to illustrate the case about the importance of science in decision-making, and that sometimes people willfully ignore science because if they know about a problem, then they would feel compelled to solve it. So in the late 80s, the EPA was supporting scientific research to understand 2 things. First, what were the environmental impacts on fish and ecosystems from acid rain in the northeastern United States? And second, what steps needed to be taken to stem the production of acid rain pollution? So one day, the president's chief of staff asked the EPA administrator, Riley, to stop the EPA from doing further research on acid rain. And the EPA administrator protested, saying, well, if you don't do the research, they wouldn't understand the problem they needed to solve. And the chief of staff replied, exactly. And he went on to complain that the EPA's latest cost estimate of saving the fish had doubled. And the EPA administrator replied to the chief of staff, yes, your observation is correct. The cost of saving the fish has doubled because our research shows the problem is twice as bad as we had initially thought. Ultimately, the acid rain story was a success story. You don't hear a lot of talk about acid rain these days, do you? That's because Bill Riley prevailed. The EPA's research continued, and investment in policies were made to solve the problem. It's a great success story that could have been derailed if the scientific research had not been allowed to continue and reach its final conclusions. The science-based recommendations were clearly communicated and acted upon by policymakers and businesses. So in making the case for scientists as engaged citizens, Professor Naomi Oreskes says, quote, the facts don't speak for themselves. Someone has to speak up for the facts, and that is us, the scientific community. Kirk Engelhardt, a vice chancellor at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, wrote, broader engagement isn't a luxury, it's absolutely necessary if we want to boost understanding of and support for scientific research. The public isn't reading published research papers, and the media often needs help making sense of them. If you want to maximize the impact of your research, you need to share it broadly and make it understandable. So in my career, I've tried to be one of those people who bridges the world of science and research with the policy and practice world. And I urge you to develop and hone your ability to be a bridge between your work as a scientist and those people who need to understand and apply your work to make the world a better, more resilient, and prosperous place. So, as you all step out of UCSB and into that great world, I urge you to become a problem solver, to become a great communicator, and to be an ambassador for science by being an active and engaged scientist citizen. And finally, a bit of advice from someone who started out as a young girl with a dream. When the world offers you a brass ring of opportunity, you grab that with all your might. Even if it isn't quite what you expected, but you believe it could take you where you want to go. So I want you to be bold. I want you to trust your instincts. I want you to work hard, and I want you to find a way to be a change maker and make a difference in this world, because the world needs you, and you are ready and prepared to build the future you want to see and be in. Congratulations to all of you, the College of Letters and Science class of 19. Go get them! Thank you.